Before this story gets too stale, I wanted to put in a few words. Many may have seen Schwarzenegger's road patch as mere show, but with him it can be a bit hard to tell. He and his friend Franco Columbu ran a construction company in the late 60s, and it's best to let him tell a bit of the tale.
But at that point, there was no money in bodybuilding. That's a key thing that everyone has to understand. Unlike today where the top bodybuilding champions make millions of dollars, in those days there was no money in bodybuilding. And so when we didn't have enough money, we literally had to go to work. And so Franco and I, since Franco's talent was to be a bricklayer, and a very skilled bricklayer, and learned that in Italy and in Germany, we were able to go and start thinking about the idea of putting an ad in the LA Times, creating a company and calling it European Bricklayers and Masonry Experts, marble experts, building chimneys and fireplaces.
So it's entirely possible that he actually patched up the road, although I'm a little curious where they compressed all the asphalt down so it wasn't just wet, muddy goo. But I have some sympathy for the city of LA, which sports some 20,000 miles of road they must maintain. Most of their system is over 25 years old, and that means repair and maintenance are a constant issue. Cars greatly wear the roads they drive upon, and it's only made worse as they have gotten larger and heavier, and boy have they. The problem, however, of timely maintenance and repair here is suburbia itself. With so much road to maintain and the historical undertaxing of suburban property to cover the cost of their utilities, a decline into disrepair and neglect is inevitable. This is an issue that affects cities all over the U.S. And the YouTube channel Not Just Bikes amply discusses the issue in several of his episodes, drawing on the research of strongtowns.org.
Cities don't have to pay very much to build new infrastructure, but they do get a big influx of tax revenue from the new developments that spring up. This brings us to the first problem. It encourages cities to build lots of new developments, even if they don't make any financial sense. Of course, all this new cheap infrastructure comes with a very important catch. The city may get it built for cheap, but the city is ultimately responsible for paying to maintain that infrastructure forever. They collect taxes from the new developments that spring up around that infrastructure, and those taxes go towards future maintenance. The big problem begins if there isn't enough tax revenue collected to cover the replacement cost of the infrastructure, and that is exactly what has happened with car-dependent suburbia, because car-centric sprawl is horrendously expensive. To explain this problem further, I'll use the example of a, quote, ideal development that is often used as an example by Strong Towns. Imagine a new suburban housing development on the edge of town. In this case, the developer completely pays for the street and turns it over to the city for maintenance. The residents move in and start paying tax revenue. This couldn't get any better for the suburban municipality. Free development, free road, a bunch of new tax revenue. This is awesome. Now, the municipality in this case would put a little bit of money aside for the maintenance of that road. So what would this look like in an American suburb? Well, at first, streets don't need a lot of maintenance. They may require some minor repairs such as filling cracks, but in general, new streets are pretty cheap. So the suburban city's cash flow looks something like this. Everything looks pretty great until the end of the street's life cycle, because eventually all streets and roads need resurfacing. So suddenly, the graph goes like this. If the city were just this one street, it would already be bankrupt. But cities aren't just one street. They're made up of hundreds of streets and individual developments. So assuming a new development every other year, a real growing city's cash flow would look something like this, with new developments covering the cost of past developments. As you can see, growth covers the problem, and the city is financially solvent again. Yay, this is great! Let's build more! Lots of asphalt and free parking for everyone! But when you get a couple of generations into the suburban experiment, the maintenance obligations of the past start to catch up with you. Suddenly, your suburb's finances start to look something like this. Because when you lose money on every development, you don't make it up in volume.
LA is well over that cliff, and in some ways, the fact that Arnold had to open his own wallet to fix his neighborhood road is a great example of personal responsibility. He's paying a little of his way for the infrastructure outside his property. Since conservatives would balk at any tax increase to actually cover the costs they incur, I can say it isn't all that bad. He could organize his block to fork over some cash to maintain the damage their cars do to their local roads.